Today I'm going to do a reading for you from the Legends of Ancient Egypt. I'm going to start with chapter 6, The Kingdom of Osiris, the birth of the god. Far up the river Nile, on a fertile strip of land that borders the stream, once stood the mighty city of Thebes. Its ruins still cover a large area, and in the days of its greatest splendor, it was the most magnificent city in the world. But at the time when this story opens, it was still young, and its gorgeous temples were not yet built. Its people worshipped, it is true, but not the God of heaven. Amen they knew not, and the majesty of Ra they could not have understood. Their gods were images of wood and stone, and the sun and the river Nile. To these false gods a temple had been built on a site destined to become the center of a grand and noble worship. It stood amid a grove of shady trees, and from under its portals bubbled forth a spring of purest water, so sweet and sparkling that the people said it was blessed by the gods they honored there. To this spring a water carrier was trudging one hot summer morning. He was young, but already his back was bowed with constant stooping under the weight of his goatskin bag. "Why work at this hour?" asked a brother carrier, who, with goatskin slung over his shoulder, was wending homeward. "Why work at all, I might ask," replied the other sourly. "True, but needs must, you know," said the first. "Otherwise, methinks neither of us would be here now. Yet today is different. With this fierce heat blowing off the desert, one cannot be blamed for resting early." "It might do thee good," he went on, seeing the other did not speak. "Thou dost not seem in merry mood." "Nor do I feel so," was the curt reply. "But one must eat, and such as I cannot eat unless he works. There are many to feed now, for my father lies ill, and I must needs provide for all. Well, I shall wait until evening. 'Twill be cooler then," said his companion as he walked away. Pamelise, for such was the water carrier's name, watched his friend depart, and felt bitter in his heart against the fate that had made his lot so hard. Then, remembering the hungry mouths in the little hut of reeds by the river, he turned to the spring. Just as he had filled the skin, he thought he heard his name called. He looked around but saw no one. "Pamelise," came the voice again. There could be no doubt about it this time, and he paused and lifting the water bag to stare at the steps leading up to the temple. We're talking about the kingdom of Osiris here. "Pamelise," came the voice a third time, and the poor man, knowing not what might befall him, dropped the goatskin to the ground, where the water gushed out unheeded, making a pool about his feet. "Fear not," said the voice, which to Pamela's astonished senses seemed to come from the statue before the temple door. "Fear not, but go down into the town and say to the people, 'Osiris, Lord of all the earth, is born.' Afterwards proclaim the message throughout the length and breadth of the land." The voice ceased, and on the instant, Pamelise, forgetting all about the water skin, took to his heels and never stopped until he reached his house. There he told the story to his wife, who said the heat had muddled his wits, and bade him go back for the goat skin before someone came and stole it. But the old man, his sire, who lay with eyes closed on a bed of straw at the farther end of the room, called his son to him and asked him to repeat his tale. "It was the voice of heaven," said the old man. as Pamela's concluded. Go proclaim thy message as thou hast been bidden. For myself, I rejoice that I have lived to hear the gladsome tidings. May the blessing of the gods be upon thee, my son. And the sufferer turned his face to the wall and died. And Pamela's hastened to do as he had been commanded, and thus it was the news of Osiris's birth came to the world. Egyptian gods and heroes. Number 2, the coming of the god and goddess. One evening in early summer, as the westering sun hung over the hills in a sea of crimson and purple and gold, a man halted under a sycamore tree near a rude temple that overlooked the Nile at Thebes. He was of enormous stature, yet so properly formed withal that one would scarce have heeded it until another man stood beside him. Then he seemed more than mortal. By his side stood a woman, surely the most beautiful and most graceful on whom the sun had ever risen. The sweet and gentle face, fair of skin and tinted rosy red, the comely figure clad in a robe of clinging white, and the wealth of chestnut hair that when it fell down to her feet covered her as with a garment and shone in the dying sunlight like burnished copper, told of a traveler from other lands than the burning plains of Egypt. As the sun dipped behind the peak, changing the dull gray and brown of the hills to deepest purple and painting the waters of the river in flaming red, she turned to the man and then toward the setting orb. Lifting their hands in adoration, they called on the name of Ra, bowed thrice to the ground, and sang a short hymn in the sun god's praise. Let us tarry here and rest, said the man, and spreading his mantle on a slab of stone, they sat down. When he took from his cloak a reed and began to blow upon it. Was it possible that this music was born of earth, now soft as the cooing of the doves in the trees, now plaintive as a seabird's call, anon rippling like a stream over the pebbles in its bed? Sorry about that. Then loud and fast, even as the rushing of a mountain torrent, it ended at last with such a burst of swelling sound as comes from a mighty choir that sings in unison. Then he played a simple song to the chant of the woman's voice. Wonderful had been the playing, marvelous beyond all words was the singing, soft and low, yet thrilling in its richness and fullness. It seemed to tell of joy and sorrow, of brightness and shadow, of storm and sunshine, and of an infinity of love. As the last sweet strains died away, a venerable old man, clad in a white robe, encircled by a belt of gold, came slowly toward the two wayfarers. A pleasant evening to you both, he said, a mixture of awe and wonder plainly written on his face. And to thee, oh my father, said the man. Canst tell us, he asked, where in this city we may find lodging for a time? We are travelers and would fain stay here to rest a while. For some moments, the newcomer said not a word, but continued to gaze with eyes that would read them through and through. At length, he bowed his head to the ground and kissed the sandal, first of the man, then of the woman. Thereon, looking up, he spoke. The makers of music such as I have heard, he said, should have the best the city can give. I am the priest of this temple, and in my study of the stars, I have learned somewhat of the mysteries of the heavens. Long have I known of your coming, but never did I think that I should be the first to greet you here on earth. And with worshiping eyes again, the holy man gazed on the wondrous pair. Sorry about that. Will my lord and lady deign to accept such hospitality as my poor house can offer? He asked. It is because thou hast been so faithful in thy service that we came to thee first, replied the man. We thank thee and accept thy kindness, but I charge thee straitly to tell no man what thou knowest, whence we came or why. That shall be known as the gods will. Your servant hears and obeys, said the priest, and he bowed his head to the dust. Now lead us to thy house, continued the stranger. Come, Isis, he said, turning to the woman. We will go with him, for the hour groweth late. The blessing of Ra be with thee alway, said the woman to the priest in her rich low voice. And placing her arm within the others, they went forward. And in this wise did Osiris and Isis, his consort, come to the land of Egypt. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story of Isis and the Osiris. This is Sharri Plaza. Please visit my YouTube channel again, subscribe, and hit like to show your support if you want to hear more videos concerning the culture of ancient Egypt, the Kemetic culture. Thank you.